any drinkers out there, you might want to stock up on booze now because the strike spanning 14 ports in the U.S. could affect liquor imports within the month. Union dockworkers up and down the East and Gulf Coast began striking earlier Monday. Workers hit the picket lines just after midnight. More than $2 billion worth of merchandise, including cars, clothing, farm machinery, and more, are at a standstill after negotiations between the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance, representing ocean carriers and port operators, broke down. Dock workers are demanding better wages and automation.
The Biden administration has stood firm on letting these negotiations play out. President Biden on Sunday told reporters that he doesn't believe in Taft-Hartley, a federal law that allows the president to step in and call for an 80-day cooling period when there's a national security risk. Republicans and over 170 industry groups have already warned a prolonged strike could have significant ramifications on the U.S. economy, especially ahead of the holiday season. Trade groups penned a letter to Biden saying, quote, "It is imperative that the parties return to the table without engaging in disruptive activities that could harm the economy and the millions of businesses, workers, and consumers who rely on the seamless flow of goods, both imports and exports, through our East Coast and Gulf Coast ports." Some companies have made contingency plans to offset potential economic impacts, for example, rerouting cargo to the West Coast in anticipation of the work stoppage. But some acknowledge that only so much can be done.
This is a lot. I mean, I was just looking at the numbers. Half of all cargo coming into the United States, that's 1 million, what's it called? Boxes. What do they call it? Tons, whatever. The cargo crates that come in are going to be at risk. And then 3/4 of all containers going out are at risk. So this is a significant portion of the docks, 14 docks as stated. The largest docks in America are still on the West Coast, Los Angeles being the largest. So rerouting it would be quite a bit of a reroute. We remember what happened with the Suez Canal when there was that breakdown with one ship stuck in the Suez Canal and how that affected supply chain all over the world.
Yes, we've all become more knowledgeable about disruptions to the supply chains and how that can have devastating effects. You know, at a time where Americans, the thing that they're most concerned about is the cost of goods, what they're paying at the grocery store, what they're paying for goods and services. I think this is a very awful potential economic catastrophe looming on the horizon. It's interesting that Biden does have the authority to do something about it under the law and has said that he does not recognize that authority and will not exercise it. Do you think that will be something that is appreciated by voters in the upcoming election?
I think it is. It could be an October surprise. I don't know if they'll feel it right away because sometimes these situations play out. It takes a few weeks, a few months. Inflation is down, but it doesn't mean it's going to be reduced. The rate is down right now, but a lot of Americans aren't feeling that because things are still expensive and wages haven't gone up. So you already have this economic vibe happening in this country, and credit card debt is up. But yes, the stock market's doing better. The meta economy is great. You already have these issues as voters are thinking about them going into the election. Maybe just the conversation about this, even though it may not be impacting their wallets just yet, will impact a few voters' minds, especially in those swing states. And listen, Biden does have the ability as the union president to stand with union leaders and push back against these big companies. He does have the ability to help be some sort of negotiator in peace. Don't forget, he showed up on the picket lines in the past. He did pressure companies in the past to move a little bit, especially if it's going to hurt their bottom line too. I mean, companies must be thinking, how much money are we going to lose by rerouting everything? How much money are we going to lose facing the longshoremen, which is a very strong union. You may recall, in 1934, they had a massive strike, and it was one of the most impactful strikes in American history, and it changed the way we dealt with labor in this country. On the Waterfront, which won an Academy Award, Elia Kazan, one of the greatest movies of all time, was about the longshoremen fighting back against mob bosses, and there was a murder, and I highly recommend folks see it. So this is a union that has a legacy of really standing with their workers when they do it. It's just the timing could not be worse. And how does that affect labor across the country if, for instance, this union might be a bad narrative for Democrats and suddenly they get Donald Trump as a president? Are they going to be regretting striking now versus, say, in a month or two?
One of the biggest changes I would like to see that's somewhat related to this issue would be a repeal of the Jones Act, which makes
I agree with you on this.
Just massively more expensive. The estimates are that we lose somewhere between $20 and $60 billion a year because we are required under a law from, 1920s that ships doing shipping in between ports that are both ports are in the United States, the ship, it must be a ship that was built in America, so this just massively raises the cost of everything. It's especially bad for Puerto Rico. And in fact, they suspend this law every time there's a disaster in Puerto Rico because they recognize that, oh, now we can't afford, well, we can't afford to have it any time. We could at any time suspend it and get the economic benefits from allowing whatever the most efficient use of shipping would be to move goods from one place to the other instead of artificially saying it has to be made in America.
The Jones Act has been so restrictive to the people of Puerto Rico, and I've covered it. I was there for several hurricanes, and after Hurricane Maria, of course, it wasn't just that Puerto Ricans didn't have lights and water, and by the way, they're still dealing with power outages to this day, and they're concerned about it for this election even. It's that the goods, it's been so restrictive. The American companies came in, the sugar companies came in and stripped Puerto Ricans of their land to make them dependent on importing goods from the United States, so much so that the majority of goods that are brought into Puerto Rico are coming from the United States because of the Jones Act. But what happens in the case of a hurricane is that if power is not on and you need oil to run gas generators, which is the situation, those ships sit on the dock right there, and you're staring at them on the island, and they can't come in because of the Jones Act. And so
it's really stupid.
It's not just a prohibitive cost for Puerto Ricans. Goods are more expensive on the island. They're almost as expensive, if not the same, as goods on the island of Manhattan. A completely different scenario, right? But the cost of living there has gone up while people are being displaced, while these tax breaks are there, bringing in rich folks from the outside. And then on top of it, a gallon of milk is like twice the price. And it's not fresh. So the produce you see there is not fresh because it's being shipped in. Sometimes they'll even grow it on the island of Puerto Rico, ship it to Florida, and then it's shipped back because that's how restrictive this law is. Yep. The Jones Act is so ancient, and I'm incredibly pro-labor, but I definitely have an issue with labor when it comes to the Jones Act, and I think the people of Puerto Rico agree with that too. It is overwhelmingly popular to end the Jones Act.
Because laborers, I mean, I'm also pro-labor, but laborers are also consumers of food and supplies. So raising prices for everyone is not a good strategy. So this is why you can never believe the government or politicians when they say, no, we're doing everything to make the economy better. We're doing everything to keep prices down. You're not doing everything because this is a pretty simple thing that could be changed that's never changed. It's a shame. Well, we'll continue following this strike, see if it comes to fruition. I would expect that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, maybe J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are going to get a lot of questions about this coming up. More Rising in just a minute.